Welcome. I think we'll give it a little go before everyone is joining. Thank you for joining, those of you already here. Just seeing if we need any more on here. I think we will kick it off. So, thank you everyone for joining this webinar. Grow Sales Digital Enabled is the headline for today. How digital sales becomes a key part of your commercial engine for growth. I know a lot of you sits in different contexts out there, different companies, different industries, etc. But I have tried to gather some information for you on the various topics that I think is important across digital sales, no matter which industry you're in and no matter what your company is. So that is what I will try to provide you with today. My name is Carsten Pingel. I'm a partner here at Kvadrant Consulting. I have lived 15 years of digital business and commercial execution, first on the corporate side and then moving in as a consultant 4 years ago and advising a lot of companies on the topic that we're talking about today. I love technology, but business value is the closest to my heart. So I'm always a business first, technology, processes, etc. afterwards, which you will probably also see during my talk today. So there are 3 topics that I would like to take you through today. It goes in the section of the why, the what, and the how. First of all, the importance of digital sales. Why are we talking about this and what are actually sort of the potential that we're talking about here? Secondly, what is it? What is it actually of a kind of a challenge that you are either just about to enter or maybe you have already worked with this and are trying to scale the efforts that you are currently ongoing. And then finally, I will try to come up with some very hands-on tips of things that I've seen working and have moved companies forward during their journeys. So let's kick it off. First of all, what I'm going to do today is base everything I tell and say on my personal experiences in this space. My experience comes from having worked with B2B or B2C, e-commerce companies during some of the most hefty growth phases that they were in, meaning that we had a lot of growth. We worked across the value chain, and I did a lot of things wrong. I also did a lot of things together with teams that really worked. And then when I became a consultant 4 years ago, I actually started working a lot with B2B companies. I've worked with B2B companies since then on a European scale, in a Danish context. And those experiences that I've got from this, that is to some extent different, I'll try to share those with you guys today. So let's kick it off. So why digital sales? Yes, it's all about meeting the demands of the future customers. As was the case with B2C, you all know it, customers are moving online. It's the same thing that happens in B2B. There is a pull from the customer side. And this is very important to remember when you sit in your company and say, yeah, we might not do as much here and there, etc. There is a fundamental shift happening right now that we need to relate to. And what is happening? Yeah, buyers want to self-service themselves. We see that in every survey. Some of you have probably already seen it in various other reports, etc. I don't need to repeat it, but everything from problem identification, solution exploration, requirements building, supplier selection, validation, consensus creating, and whether to buy, etc. We see it all the time that websites, digital interfaces are equally and often more important than the classical touch points between humans. This has not made buying easier. A lot of customers say that they are a little bit overwhelmed with what, as you can see on the left-hand side, 50% customers actually say that they are overwhelmed by the information they get. And because B2B selling is complex at times, they also experience that when interacting with you as a company. They are sort of dragged through various points of contact, etc. And sometimes this might not be a homogeneous journey. So overwhelmed and a lot of complexity in the purchase is also something to relate to as a company when going into B2B digital sales. And there's also something happening in the industry that is really sort of pushing the agenda for looking into digital sales. So increased global competition, commoditization, and price competition is something that influences it. Marketplaces are taking a larger role. This is not such a big thing in the Northern European hemisphere, but when we move further south in Europe and to the US, marketplaces in B2B selling is a really, really big thing. Some of you might already know from your own context. And then we also see this shift across the value chain, where in some industries there are distributors that are trying to compete for sort of the end-to-end customer contact, and leaving some of the OEMs a little bit out of the picture, or trying to push in private label products instead because they have the end consumer contact. And we also see that some of you, if you are an OEM yourself, are launching direct to consumer channels and are participating to get more end customer data. So what is the case here is that digital sales is not only sort of narrowly the thing where you sell to your customer, but this is also something that builds an advantage for you as a company to be better able to react on market developments and move when things are happening. That is much easier when you are based on a digital model. Companies prepared to sell are better positioned to adapt to the changing market conditions and customer behaviors. And we see that all the time. It makes it much easier for you to act relatively fast. So this new context is what requires all of you to work in a little bit of a different way. So fundamentally, it's about us needing to solve more of the sales process through marketing, digital self-service, or completely new roles entering the game. Some of you might have seen this picture of looking at how B2B selling was traditionally and how it has moved into a modern context. But the simple sort of takeaway here is that as B2B selling has evolved, of course, there is a sort of smaller, or at least a changed role of field sales. We see consultancy selling, account-based marketing, inside sale play, and revenue ops play a bigger role than we have previously, and becoming very important disciplines. But taking it back to digital, if you look at the right-hand side of this slide, then of course, when you have low complexity of sales, that could be after sales of spare parts or just simple products that are not that difficult to sell, then self-service is a huge thing. And I think there's no way around it as a company. You need to make a self-service solution for those products or services. And when you move further up the complexity ladder, then you also see that there is a case for digital, because it might not be that the digital product or service is sold directly end-to-end digitally, but at least there is an element where you affect it digitally along the journey, and I'll come back to that in some of the slides that I'll share with you today. So this is the context, but what is actually the value then? Because at the end of the day, all of us working with digital sales, this is a business case that we need to sell in to a company of why we do this. Typically, I look at the business value on sort of two dimensions. First of all, the revenue generation and expansion. Typically, this is when you move with digital sales and you start sort of exploring this, you see that you are able to increase the share of wallet, which is obviously something that a lot of you will be looking to. But you also see that the digital sales model is something that enables you in a much faster and better way to tap sort of into either new markets or selling new products, which you were not was not easy for you previously in a more fixed physical model. And then, of course, operational efficiency is a big thing. There's no doubt that automating sales, which digitally is the best enabler of, is a huge thing on the agenda in many places, because if we can bring down the cost to serve, obviously this is a good thing for all companies, not just going directly to the bottom line, but also for a sales department where you see the opportunity to spend less time on sort of the more simple sales and increase time spent on the more complex sales that you need to realize. But there is also a dimension that is often forgotten here, which is sort of customer satisfaction. Obviously, it's where all need to start. I'll come back to that. because sometimes you actually do feel that it tends to be overlooked that this is actually about the customer. But customer satisfaction, we see great digital processes, we see customer satisfaction sort of surpassing what we've seen in all other channels. So this is really a case where you can sort of delight your customers in a much better way that you have normally been doing. And then the sort of the right-hand side of it, workforce empowerment or employee empowerment. This is actually also something that really is a big case internally in companies. What if you can provide yourselves, sales teams, with digital tools that empower them in their selling? Then that is actually also what can convince everyone about digital and the aspects of digital to become something that you really buy into. So these 4 dimensions, when you build the business case for what you're doing, or when you're doing new stuff in digital sales, this is sort of the split that you need to orientate yourself within. And when you then look across the journey of buying and selling, there is a lot of documentation for why this actually makes an impact. And I've spent a lot of time with various clients on this topic, and for sure, the conversation internally in companies is often, yeah, digital might be necessary. We need to move into a modern world, but does it actually make a difference? And do we actually see the uplift from spending tons of time, resources, investments, etc. in this space? And I would say that again and again, after having seen companies move into this field, very sort of different areas that they've moved into, there is a case for this business-wise. If you look at these sort of different aspects that I've taken forward here, which is from a McKinsey survey, that then you can see when you follow the customer journey, identifying customers, the win rate, the share of wallet, the customer satisfaction score points, the churn, the administration cost, and price erosion. And I won't go into all the sort of the documentation, and you can get this afterwards. But there is a clear case for percentage point improvements if you move in and lean in to a more digital facilitated way of selling. And it doesn't need to be fully digital. I'll come back to that later, but at least facilitated by digital. So, facilitated by digital. Right now, in a lot of digital sales dialogues that we have with customers, there's a little bit of a new thing coming up right now, which is that there's been 2, 3, 4 years of talking, at least in the first phases of B2B, a lot about self-service e-commerce. B2B e-commerce has been on the agenda, which is really sort of it's very sort of obvious, because these are typically the sales that you can start with. They are relatively easy to move online. But the big space here is actually those sales that are either a little bit complex when selling, or where the product itself is a little bit complex. And those are what we call the digital assisted sales. And the point here is that might even be as big or even bigger an opportunity for you as a company to dig into those and find out, how do we actually move the needle closer to realizing a sale, even though it's not a fully digital process. And that area has been overlooked a little, because in the digital assisted sales, you need a little more nudge to come forward and realize the sale. And then when we move into the digital enabled sales, that's a little bit of a story sort of further away from because at that point, the customer would typically not know which solution it looks for, he or she looks for. So there you need to sort of scope and help sort of specify and really nudge the customer forward. So those two, digital assistance and digital enabled, I foresee that those areas will be the big opportunity spaces, but also what we will see a lot of more effort going into in the coming years. So a question for you guys listening today would be, where's your biggest opportunity, and are you truly addressing it? And I think that it will vary very much from the context you're sitting in, but I do believe that the digital assisted space has been sort of overlooked a little, because it tends to be a little bit more complex. But navigating your way through that and finding those pockets of areas where you could do more, I think is a huge opportunity for most companies. And that goes with the digital enabled as well. But I think I would sort of move from the self-service and to the digital assisted area in the coming years. So what is actually the big idea before we come down a little bit closer to what you can do in your company. The big idea in digital sales. What if all customers could buy from you and service themselves throughout their interaction with you? They can't today, obviously. This is a self-service scenario in some way, depending on where you look at the scenario or the sort of the continuum of sales. And you might say, yeah, that's unrealistic. He's standing here and saying that you can just make self-service the way. But ultimately, customers want to self-service themselves. So this is what is going to happen. We will see a higher and higher degree of self-service also within the digital assisted sales. Even though you can't self-service your way all the way to the sale, we will see more self-service. And that will be what customers demand in the future. So my question would be, why not make this your North Star in your company and break it down instead of waiting and maybe sometimes being a little passive saying, this will never happen. Because we saw that, coming back to my point from the beginning of the webinar, we saw what happened in B2C. And yes, B2B is not the same, but the fundamental development and the direction we are going in when we follow the most mature industries is the same. And we see that customers ultimately want the power of ordering or buying themselves to a very, very high degree, and it constantly moves. And this will happen in B2B as well. So my sort of my focus here would be to say, why don't you look at your company and see what if there was a clear path to purchase and an efficient way to convert to sales for all leads and customers? And maybe this could be the simple vision, making it easy to be a customer and increase your order efficiency. And those might sound as very simple words, but I'll come back to that later. But making it easy to be a customer is really a key word here, because when I've worked with B2B companies in various contexts and been a part of their journey, I always sort of pose the question in the end when we have either engaged or when we meet again a year later, and then I ask, why, or what actually moved the needle for you? And everyone says it was different stories. They say, we made this and this easier for our customer, and suddenly things moved. It's the same story again and again. So that's why the simple word of making it easy is actually a little bit more than that. And then increasing your order efficiency. I mean, this is about your cost to serve. It's about making it efficient to realize a sale. And that is a discipline in itself. And I'll come back to that later. So digital sales, this is why we are standing here today and talking about this great topic. So moving to the second part, how is that actually happening in companies? How do you go about this? So basically, digital sales, this might sound rather banal, plays a role across how you sell to both new and existing customers. We all have seen different versions of a butterfly illustration. We move customers from awareness to consideration to selection when it's about acquiring customers. We need to convert them. And then we have existing customers that we need to onboard, we need to retain them, and we need to expand the business that we are doing with them. This also goes for digital sales. And at all these stages, we need to be very specific, and I'll mention that again and again throughout today. Jobs to be done. Jobs to be done is the best way to think about digital sales. Which kind of job is it that we need to do for the customer, and therefore realizing a target for us as a company? And what are actually the conversion points during this journey? And there, I would say, there is a tendency to skip the sort of the details here, which are more important than so, because doing this exercise rather systematically, it is what makes you aware of what to do. And if it gets to be too generic, as it is with this slide right now, then it doesn't provide the exact value for you as a company. So what to do about that? I would say that if you look out at a buying journey like this, the job for you would be, of course, to look at it as new customers, existing customers, map out these phases. They are rather generic across companies. Even though you have your company is special, you sell a different product, they are more or less the same. Needs to be adjusted to your context, of course. Then everything centers around a sale, whether it's existing and new customer, obviously. And there are some very specific jobs in each phases and some specific KPIs to follow in each of these. And then when you look across this sales journey, on the left-hand side, you have channels that you need to be aware of. It's very different what the channel split is. Again, there is, of course, a lot of traffic coming in from website, etc. But there are also B2B companies where the email ordering is the main thing. So that is a key component for you to find out what are the channels of engagement. Then you need to look at the stakeholders. We all know that what often sort of sets B2B selling apart from classical B2C selling is the number of stakeholders that need to be involved. Sometimes we are lucky that it's only one that can make the decision, but very often there are more stakeholders involved. And then the final dimension, moving back to what I told previously, the level of digital engagement is actually really, really important to decide on here, because in some parts of this buying journey, you can provide digital self-service touch points, meaning that you can drive the engagement ultimately all the way to a basket. But this is not the case in every situation in this journey. So please take the time to sort of find out, when am I providing something that looks like a basket, self-service? When am I more assisting the sale and sort of making sure that it comes over the line? And when am I working with digital enabled, which is a little bit further from the sale, but still playing a very crucial role? For me, doing this exercise very thoroughly is digital sales excellence at its best. And then the journey that you're entering. A lot of you would probably be at different phases of your B2B selling journey. So you need to sort of find out and map where you are yourself, but there are some generic takeaways from this sort of a mapping of a journey. Typically, we see companies starting with the channel shift, sort of moving existing customers digitally, meaning that you can bring down cost of serve, you can probably serve them a little bit better. Then you at a second phase, you start creating more digital features, you increase sort of the ease of ordering even more and provide some services on the way. And when you come a little bit further, then you start working with customer acquisition more aggressively than you've probably done in the beginning, because there you were just moving existing customers that you already had a contact point with. And then moving further again, advanced digital business, where you start doing more personalization and digging into that. Again, I would say, coming to the last two phases, please be aware that at that point you need to have very thorough business cases, because you can, as in B2C, in the B2C world, get very, very sort of enthusiastic about new features, personalizations, etc., that might not prove the business value. So I would say a lot of value in the first three phases. And a second point here for you as a digital sales leader, the first phases and the shift between phases are actually a thing itself. We very often see that when you have sort of come a far way in one of the phases, you meet what we call a glass ceiling. You are suddenly stuck. Sales doesn't move as fast as you wanted them in the first phase, and then you start thinking, okay, what now? And at some companies, you enter sort of a little bit of a trap where you are suddenly sort of lose motivation a little. And the thing is here that you need to be aware how far you are in your adoption of your sales. And at that point, you need to be aware of selling in the next phase and preparing for that, because we've actually seen companies being very razor sharp on one phase and then having a stall period of 1 or 1.5 years where they didn't move, because they hadn't sort of said there are next steps here, we're not done, which is typically a conversation with the boardroom that can be a little bit tough if you haven't prepared the journey in its full length. And then there is a second point to this slide, which is also that we see companies being, what can you say, fascinated about all aspects of these 5 phases and doing a little bit here and there along the journey. And that typically doesn't bring you in a very good place, because you spread your efforts very, very thin. So a recommendation here would be to say, if you are, for example, in the first channel shift phase, focus razor sharply on that. Get it done. Measure how far you are with that. Prepare for the next phase, but get that done, and don't get fascinated by a hyper personalization project or whatever someone might come to you with. That is actually not what moves the needle at the phase that you are in. So, what does it actually require to fulfill a B2B e-commerce or digital sales ambition? Typically, we have 10 capabilities. You can map them in various ways. But first of all, of course, you need to have a strategy. It needs to come from the corporate strategy, and you need to you need to enable a platform, etc. You need to have a plan for how you move forward. Then you need to build and optimize. There's an e-commerce platform that is obviously a very important case. You need to find out the ownership in the organization. You need to have capabilities that can help you with the digital development, because there are service touchpoints that needs to be developed now at this point. Content pressure is moving up because there's a lot of content that is needed to service your customer in this new way. And then the whole thing about how you operate this as a B2B company, because this is something that needs to be operated within and together with the rest of the company, else it won't fly. And then when you start executing and drive the trade, because ultimately this is a sales channel, it's sales, it's just sales happening in a new channel. Then there is buyer management, channel management, merchandising, and trading. There's a really, really there's a need of a cadence like there is in every sales team, but a new kind of cadence here with different ways of working and tools to make sure that you hit your targets week in and week out. Then there is a huge dependency on assortment and logistics and customer care, because even though you operate a sales channel, these either goods or services needs to be delivered by the rest of the organization in a timely manner in a competitive landscape. So really, really don't lose focus on that part. I have a separate point on that later on. And then, of course, digital marketing and execution is a new discipline for most, because it moves much closer to transactions. It gets to be much more of a revenue marketing role that you need to play in your e-commerce team. So a need for capabilities in this area. And then the number of data points will increase dramatically. That's the case. That's why we do digital. But you need to find your way in terms of having a proper reporting tools. You need to have data available for yourself, and you need to have your dashboards in place so that you can follow the trade in a very, very timely manner throughout what you do. Okay, 10 capabilities. And this sounds a little complex now, maybe. And complexity is actually a thing in itself in B2B sales, and probably is in many of the business conversations you have in your company. But complexity and competing demand for attention is actually your worst enemy. Maybe because you work in digital, where there are so many people that are enthusiastic about selling you a new way of doing things, and there are a lot of things happening within the space of AI, etc. So complexity is great, and new technology is also really, really great. Complexity is like it is there, but they are also often moving into being your worst enemy when succeeding with digital sales. So that is why, and moving into my third section today, I would like to provide you with 5 tips to how you can't remove complexity, but how you can help make a more clear view on what you do and cut out a little bit of a complexity and gather people around a more simple vision and a way to do things that is focused on executing really, really great. So the point here, and I'll come back to each of the 5 tips: run digital sales like it was a small business of yours, but make it everyone's business. That's an important thing. So what is it? Have a clear business plan. I talked about that previously. Make it simple to buy from you. Stand out on your core strength, not just some generic sales model. Improve a few things at a time, and make sure everyone knows what success looks like. This might sound very simple, but there's actually a way towards it, and it's actually simple by intention here, because I think that if you follow these sort of 5 pointers, you will get into a very, very great place, and you can improve your execution efficiency. And I'll come back to each of the 5 tips here on these topics on how you can move about them. So first tip, have a clear business plan. You need to make a very clear link to your business strategy. And the reason why I'm saying this is that very often e-commerce has been spun out very opportunistically within a company, or it has not really been getting the attention that it needed to. And when I ask the question of saying, how does this tap into the company strategy? Why does your CEO bother about what you are doing? Then either I get an answer of saying, yeah, we just need to do that and everyone else just does it in our industry. Or I get the answer of saying, we did that, but then we just got going with digital sales. And I think here there is some time to spend. And if you haven't spent it already, just revisit it. It's not something that will take you very long to do. But please look at the company's purpose and ultimate goal, and then break it down to say, okay, which segments, focus market products is actually that you drive with as an e-commerce business? What is your competitive advantage with doing e-commerce? What are the skills you need, and what are the technology you need to get in place? And then break down that plan and have a story about how this contributes to the corporate strategy. Because if it doesn't do that, then it will always be a appendix in your organization, and the ability for you to get speaking time will be very, very limited throughout the time. So have a clear role of digital sales in your go-to-market model is a simple thing here. And it is not hard, but it requires you to sit down together with the sales and make sure, if you are not driving e-commerce out of your sales department, to make sure this is part of your go-to-market model and it's fully ingrained into that. So my question for reflection for you here would be, does everyone in your company actually know and acknowledge why digital sales is important and the role it plays if you talk into it in a little bit more depth than just saying digital is important and digital is the future, etc. I would argue that this is actually not always the case. Tip 2, make it simple to buy from you. And how do you do that? And what can you do? Start simple. Back to basics. Focus on making it easy for the customer in combination with what will drive revenue. I have a few illustrations here on the left-hand side. That is this iceberg metaphor, where there is a lot of companies that say the omnichannel is the future of B2B, etc. I do believe that it is, because ultimately serving your customer in the same way across channels is a very great vision. But what tends to be forgotten is what is below the surface here. Basic things of making sure price is available, the delivery is fast, etc. You can see all the dimensions here. Those things just need to be in place. And it's not just the boring job, because this is also what drives the vast amount of adoption of your e-commerce channel. That is nailing those things. And they might not always look as fancy as driving an omnichannel or personalization vision. But if you get them right, and if you spend the tough time on getting your legacy technology, your systems, your processes in place, then you will harvest the reward afterwards. And if you also look at it from a business side, to look at the value you can see gained from providing one login, etc. When we've done this exercise, these basic things are actually those where you can justify saying we can invest in this, and because we can actually drive further business. So focus on these basic jobs to be solved, shift more focus to the core processes, and work constantly with optimization, and spend 80% of your time below the surface and 20% above, and not vice versa. So do you actually spend enough time on making it easier to be a customer? Is the sort of the teasing question here that I would pose for a lot of you, because if that is what you evolve around, then that will give you a lot of success. Tip 3, stand out on your core strengths. Know what really matters. And this comes back to the illustration of the buying journey that I started out the webinar by showing. This is a case where we define common goals along the customer journey for the company and how to meet clients' demands. But this is also a case where we looked at 3 different stakeholders on the customer side, and we actually mapped out each of the needs in various stages, how they related to each other, and in which situations we needed to have 2-3 stakeholders met with a certain touch point, a certain point of information or insight. And doing this exercise is really what moves the needle, because here you find out, and then you can prioritize. There's a lot of dots in this slide. Then you can prioritize to say, okay, if we provide insight on the greatness of our product in this phase, and if we hit these 3 target groups, that is the one thing that has historically made us sell things. If we move that digitally and enable it even better than we've been done historically when our sellers were meeting our customers, then this is typically where you will see a significant uplift, because you tap into a core strength that has always been a core strength of yours. You've just moved it digitally. Instead of just moving everything digitally, start with what you've been really good at in the old world and move it digitally, even if it's not just selling straight, but come a little bit more of a complicated process. Try to see if there's a viable way to move what you're really good at fully digitally. So this, of course, requires that you know the core advantages of your company and how digital play into those to its full strength. But again, this is where success happens, to my experience. So spend time seeking those really, really unique areas for you as a company. And they are different from company to company. So there's no sort of golden rule of thumb here. Tip 4, improve a few things at a time. And the most important job first. So I have a little bit of a lag here on my slides. I'll just wait for the slides to move forward here. But fundamentally, in the tip, the 4th tip here, the important thing is to look at adoption. For example, the case that the slide that will come next here is a case where the company looked at moving a dramatic amount. I think it was about 20% of their customers into online selling, which had previously not been sort of sold to online. Here it is again. At least I see it on my side now. So a large industrial manufacturer, huge potential to sell digitally. But what is needed here, in order to sort of focus on one thing, and again not be interested in way too many fancy things here, was that we actually looked across the segment of customers that we wanted to move online, and that's all the faces that you see here in the slide. And then we mapped out certain areas of those, more or less sort of in a big spreadsheet, saying this customer, due to this reason, we can move online into the plan. And we went from segment under subsegments to subsegments. And if we thought there was an issue of moving a customer group online, we looked into maybe incentives or things in a different way that could be sort of put into the plan or together with sales. And this job is just a tough job. But again, as in every sort of project management in your company, if you do this job and spend the majority of your time on that, creating a significant plan, very detailed of how you're moving that, get buy into it, then people will move online because they want to move online. But if you haven't given them a reason to do it, then they just phone in or deal with you in the exact same way that they've always been doing. So the thing here, again, talking on the phases of the journey, what is the biggest and most valuable opportunity at the stage that your company is in right now? Is that adoption, or is that now starting to come up with some neat digital solutions that will move you even further? You need to decide, and it's very different from each of you, but you need to make the decision and make sure that it feels right in your stomach, that you are actually hitting it now and moving towards the right focus area. Final tip, make sure everyone knows what success looks like. Have buy-in to what you do. And the case that I will bring forward here is working with a large European manufacturing company that had exactly this situation, that everyone was sure of digital sales being a huge opportunity for the company, but no one worked on the same KPIs, on the same vision, etc. And the simple thing here was actually to bring on board sales, marketing, and IT into the same KPI hierarchy, the same vision of driving digital sales, which is on the top of the hierarchy here, and and craft this vision and those underlying projects and KPIs together. And it might sound simple again, but bringing those people together at that point in time and talking about the role it plays, their role in how to drive forward digital sales, was a game changer at this. And again, it is not very simple frameworks and tools we bring into the play here. Those are things that we do in other parts of our business, but it really is those moments of time where you move. So the question for reflection here would be, to which degree is there buy-in and true prioritization of digital sales across your organization? And sort of a dear thing to my heart is, where is progress actually discussed? Do you have a cadence and do you have a forum where people across the company care about where digital sales moves? Because that is actually a main pain point typically, that there are too few people that care enough about that at times. And you need to push that boundary to make more people care about digital sales. So the how section we are in now, make it a very clear link to business strategy, start simple, know what really matters, focus on the most important job to be done first, and have an ambitious goal and story to secure your buy-in. And then again, this is tips for you that I provide you with and hope that you can use throughout your journey. They will not solve everything. I know there are many things that is difficult. I've been there myself. I know that this is not easy. We're just trying to make it easier. So I'll promise to share some pitfalls here. But the lack of actual strategy, digital sales in isolation, is a major pitfall to go into. If it's not a company-wide effort, then it gets to be tough. And customer experience, make sure that you don't mushroom it away in too many different systems and different departments. Organization, e-commerce must not be a project. It needs to be a core capability in your organization, and you need to move towards that target despite sort of being in the early days of what you do. Processes, don't underestimate the power of processes. It is very new for a company that has not sold digitally to suddenly sell digitally. If you, for example, have big warehouses where there have been different ways of engaging, don't underestimate that part. Technology and data, yes, it's important. There's a lot of time that needs to be spent there, and it's not easy. But if you lead with the technology and data as your main problem, then that will be a constant. You will constantly have technology and data problems. You need to lead with the business and the customer first, and then you need to tackle the other ones. Because if you get stuck in that technology and data constantly saying that new technologies will solve your problems, then you will be disappointed. And we've seen companies be rather sort of hitting a wall with that approach, because technology, for the sake of technology, ended up being a little bit of the saturation. And then commercial enablers. Stay close to markets, focus on the adoption and follow the sale. Is this moving? If you sort of let the markets do themselves, or sales work a little bit with digital, and then you sit in a digital department on your own, if that happens, then you will typically have issues along the way in what you do. And then if you are a company that are right now scaling e-commerce, then of course, again, resource constraints, data quality and overload, operational bottlenecks, inconsistent consumer experience, and lack of internal agreement. I completely acknowledge those are things that are still issues and needs to be tackled. So it is not, and I'm not saying here today that it is easy. So wrapping it up, how to succeed with digital sales. Back to the starting point, business value. What is your biggest opportunity to deliver value with digital sales? For me, that's the main sort of question that you should be able to point everything back towards. Again, it goes within the 4 areas of business objectives. Are you making it easy and simple and efficient to be a customer? Are you sure you've harvested the potential in digital sales? And do you know what is next? Are you actually empowering your sales function, or are you just doing stuff in isolation? Because here you could get a further element of buy-in if you were helping them. Is sales actively part of freeing up resources for more complex sales, because again, an important agenda, we see a lot of companies where setting up a sales force with more persons in it is not a case that you can ever get improved anywhere and shouldn't be able to. So the case here is saying, typically, with the sales force you have today, how can you do more? And digital sales here, I would say, is typically the biggest lever that you have to get on with that discussion. And the positive thing about these 4 areas is that you address them, either one or 2 of them mainly. Typically all 4 is to some extent into play. But what we actually see is that they have sort of a virtuous element to them, that if you start driving in one area, it suddenly gets to roll and you suddenly see demand coming internally from the organization, etc. So my sort of request for you listening today would be, get that wheel, a virtuous sort of self-enforcing cycle going, because it can be done. And when it's done, then suddenly the demand for internally and externally for you to help, etc., will be huge. And that will be a very positive situation for you to stand in as a stakeholder within digital sales. And then a few things, again, trying to simplify what we've been talking about today. This is a business of yours. It's a channel. It's a sales channel. So develop a clear picture of how you make money most profitably is your first job, in a way that benefits your company. Hire the people and develop the processes, and then put the technology in place that is needed. And it's very deliberately, again, that I put the technology as the third point here, because it must not start with that. It starts with number 1 and 2, because that's what gets things going. So, ending on a high here in terms of the philosophy of going into digital sales that I would like to to provide you with is that insist on simplification, because complexity will always be there. And if you are not the force of simplification, then everything will get very cluttered and difficult to move forward. So in a world of increasing complexity, the only answer is simplicity. And as Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So try striving for that. And I will come back here with the last point, say that all the time when you look at cases or elements of companies that they have done very well, winning companies are those that strive to make it easy, simple, and efficient to be a customer. So that would be my talk of today for you. I hope that that I provided you with some lenses, some guidance, some practical advice from having done things great or having been able to do things a little bit better the next time by providing these tips for you in the end as well. And of course, there's a lot of details to it, etc. Please reach out. Always happy to take a discussion, because things are very complex, of course, but then we can dig in it together. And then time for a Q&A. It's been a real pleasure. And by the way, we are coming out with a white paper on exactly this topic that shares some of the views that I've given you today, but also has a little bit more details into KPIs that you could be looking into, questions that maybe you see across the organizations or across your organization that sort of might need to get an interest from your side on assessing whether you do things right, etc. So providing a little bit more depth, but along the lines of what we've been talking about today. So and you will get that sent as a participant in this webinar afterwards. So to the Q&A. So we have one question here. Key indicators. What are the key indicators a company should track to measure the effectiveness of a digital sales strategy, and how do you recommend adjusting the strategy if these metrics indicate underperformance? Yeah, big question, and thank you for that. I think if you looked at the split of the 4 areas, there are a set of of KPIs for each stage. There's a net list of them, and it's also actually in the white paper. And it's about picking 1 or 2 of those sort of indicators that fit your situation as a company, and not too many of them, and then stick to them, because you can see that they are indicators of moving things. I think that is a relatively easy exercise. It the main point of that is insisting on doing it and not choosing too many. But there are sort of common, great, I would say, KPIs that you can take from other companies. So that part is I think relatively easy. It requires some work, and you need to position it internally as a KPI. And there are many KPIs already in companies. So at times the discussion is actually here: do we need a new KPI, which can be a challenge here? Then the second part of your question. How do you recommend adjusting the strategy if these metrics indicate underperformance? And I would say that the main thing is, as in every part of your business, one thing is the KPI, but if you need to investigate sort of the drivers of the KPI beneath, is it because what is the underlying reason for not sort of performing? And I think that requires at times a work, because you can be doing all the great things and then you suddenly don't see the momentum. So if you say the underlying reason that you come forward to after having analyzed why your performance is not as great as it should be, of course it can be that you have too high targets, but if the indicator is either not measuring it in the right way, or if it's a question of the target itself that you've set on the KPI, then I would say you need to go into the discussion if it's, I don't know what it could be. The reason here could typically be that you have wanted to move customers online, but the organization is not on board on moving them online. You provide them all with all the tools, etc. So if the case is that the support in the organization is pointing fingers at anyone here, then I would say the adjustment of the strategy that is in the second part of your question is about mapping out, okay, how can we change there? But I think changing the fundamental strategy, that's really very rare. I've seen companies do that, but the underlying sort of elements, the plan, needs to be changed, and that could be to either incentivize customers, incentivize sales to do it more if it was adoption that was not moving. And of course, fingers can point everywhere. You need to investigate what have you either done wrong, or what part of your rationale has been wrong? Because at times we must be honest, even though we've seen things in other industries, then yeah, it might not work for you, and then it's back to the drawing board. Yes, a second question here on the ideal cooperation between marketing, sales, and IT. This is a big one in digital sales, actually, because digital sales is placed in very different departments, to my experience. Sometimes it's isolated, sometimes it's part of sales or marketing, sometimes also part of IT, and then with a link to the business. And I would say there is no sort of recommendation of saying there's only one place it can be positioned in the company, but it needs to be really, really close to sales. But because at the end of the day, this digital sales or e-commerce function, or whatever you sit in a company, it is sales. It's a new sales channel that appeared for all of us, and therefore it needs to be treated close to sales. And then as marketing, then as IT, we deliver components into that journey, but we deliver them into a sales channel that needs to work. So I always say that if these functions are not working together, and if it's not driven from the commercial outset, then the attraction won't be really great. So close together in the both shared KPIs and shared story. I mean, shared story, it shouldn't be a situation where sales, marketing, and IT tell a different story about IT. Of course, we have different sort of domain expertise contributing to it, but the overall story and why we are doing it should be crystal clear across those organizations. And building that together closely with those teams is, for me, the key to success. Don't know if we have further questions today. Yeah, best practice in digital sales is a question coming up again and again. I think there is almost every client asks you, what is the best practice? And the brutal honest here is that there is probably no company doing everything right. So my advice here would be to look on components of the digital sales strategy, operation, and say, who has solved having a customer portal in a very, very neat way? Who has solved processes towards the warehouse in a very, so breaking down best practices, because I see a tendency that if you look at best practices across, then it gets to be a little bit difficult. But I would, this question, actually point back at what we've just been through. I think that these 5 tips is some kind of best practice. There are probably more best practices out there, but that's at least best practice to get going. And then I would encourage you to speak a lot with your colleagues in this area. It is so easy to do networking on this topic because, yes, you have a few competitors, but generally you can learn a lot about speaking to people in the B2B industry that moves their goods or services, and actually also, no matter whether they sell a product that is very, very different to yours, the learnings of how to get it going and do etc. are rather applicable across industries. So get out there and talk to your peers is also a big recommendation from my side. Yes, I think that no more questions today. I think then we will we'll wrap it up, and thank you all for joining, and don't hesitate to reach out at any point in time. I'm available, and you'll get my contact details. I am at cap@kvadrant.dk, and you will all get a white paper very soon, I think tomorrow, that gives you even further interesting reading along the lines of what we've been through today. Thank you very much for tuning in and spending a precious time, 1 hour of your day today, and have a really great rest of your day. Bye.